Takes care of that.
The Necker Bloom. For 1 white, black, green, you get a 2/7 legendary creature plant with Landfall that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 0/1 green plant creature token. If you control 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token instead. Land cards in your graveyard have Dredge 2. This here is a deck that can make your opponents very jealous. You'll get to plant a few posies and then command a horde of zombies at will. This deck is only $28 and is hopefully a deck that my Discord doesn't make fun of again. Which, by the way, is free and you can join it. The top link in the description. Everyone was freaking out about this commander. Why, you ask? Well, for good reason. This gives great use for fetch lands and grave recursion if you build it right. Essentially, it's a very potent landfall deck in Abzan colors that has a built-in way to reuse lands from the grave by just dredging them back. So if the strategy is so straightforward, what cool new unique thing am I going to be making a twist on today? Nothing. I'm making a straightforward landfall deck. It's a fully functional and strong Necker Bloom deck that doesn't cost more than a Tinder date. So how strong is it really? Well, once you finish subscribing, we can get to the bread and butter of what will make this deck really blast out of control. Don't worry, I can wait. Thanks, buddy. Explosive Vegetation. For 3 and a green, you get a sorcery that says search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. There are a total of 20 ways to search for lands and ramp in this deck. You are almost assuredly going to do so. You also have 1 way to repeatedly ramp with the tokens that you do create in Perilous Forays. That way, all you need to do to get another zombie is 1 mana and a different, more sacrificial creature token. Most of the one-time effects will get 2 lands in the field. If not, then it's split 1 hand and 1 field. And then at bare minimum, it gets 1 to field and then a fringe ability. An example of a fringe ability would be something like Beneath the Sands. It costs as much as a cultivate, but only gets 1 land. Normally, it's pretty bad. We wouldn't want to run this. But if we have our commander out, we can pay 2 mana and discard this at instant speed, which we can just mill our top 2 instead and return a land from our graveyard to our hand. That's the power of Dredge and why we run each of the clue lands. I know, it's really expensive. To pay 4 mana, tap it to investigate, to just pay another 2 mana to sacrifice a clue to dredge a single land. But this deck has an absurd amount of ramp, so you'll be pretty good on lands really quickly. But what kind of lands do we run, and how do we make them better? Well, let's do a breakdown of the lands. That way we can understand exactly how we plan to completely outvalue our opponents. We run 8 forests, 7 plains, and 6 swamps in this deck. And if we can't win with 21 basic lands, we really didn't deserve it to begin with. And among the other 22 lands, we have a slew of utility and ramp that can get our basics out of the deck. Sure, Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic both get tapped basics, but that's 2 landfall triggers, and with our commander needing a minimum of 7 lands with different names to get the zombies, they help add to the name count until we can get our full set of basics out. And even though we have enough electrolytes to give our 0/1s what they crave, we still want to try and get all of our basics out. All 6 basics, in fact. I want to give a huge shout out to the Discord. Again, free, join it. Because this addition by them really makes the deck buttery smooth and consistent. They told me about the power of snow-covered basics. And since we're doing basic land ramp, and we have 3 colors, the snow-covered land's essentially get us to 6 right away. Every landfall is a zombie from then on out. But that's not even the half of it. We run Demolition Field and Field of Ruin for some sweet non-basic land control. They also search our library for basics so we can get some more landfall triggers out of our stuff. Not to mention, most of the decks get expensive because they have non-basics, so we can kind of even the playing field that way. But this deck gets real juicy with our bounce lands. There are 5 lands we need to keep the value going. All of these enter tapped, but also return a land we control to our hands. They each tap for 2 mana, and if it's a guild land, then they tap for whatever that guild's color is, but since they enter tapped, we usually have to return another land that we control to our hand and wait a turn to use them. However, the best part about these lands isn't that they tap for 2, but that they return any land we control to our hand. Any land. I know you all see where this is going. All you gotta do is return the bounce land to your hand, and then you get a free landfall trigger that you can repeat on each of your turns. This is also important to repeat. If you run into these, know that they are super valuable pieces that you should not leave on the field. They can seriously help you get way too much value by just being a playable land. So play any other lands you draw first, and then use these when you run out of lands, but don't leave them on the field. This way your value train don't stop. And in fact, we want to hit the gas. So let's really run away with this with things like our Walking Atlas. Walking Atlas. For 2 generic, you get a 1/1 creature construct that says tap. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. This deck wants to play as many lands as we can on each of our turns. And the only things that make us break that 1 per turn rule are expensive. The only one we could really afford is Druid class. So we need other ways to keep playing lands. This helps because it can be on anyone's turn and on any land. So our rot farm can bounce back to our hands and we get another zombie and trigger all of our other landfall things, however many times we need to. These will help us get what we need to when we need it. And Marasa Rootgrazer might seem worse because it's only, basics, but the fact that it can also return a basic land to your hand is very helpful. This is the engine. It purrs beautifully. We will make 2/2 zombies with relative ease. And not to mention the 2 other cherries on top, Spelunking and Stonecedar Hierophant. Now your Orza Basilica can enter, tap for 2, and then return back to your hand. And if you tap a Llanowar or Scout, you get to do all that again. Not to mention all your land ramp spells now put all those searched lands untapped into the battlefield. Or they just get untapped right away, but that's just semantics. Essentially, they're going to be untapped by the end of it. And if you use Map the Frontier to search for your Arid Archway, you essentially stepped right into the bounce land that puts this game online right away. And that's not even to mention the coolest thing. Merch! I have some current designs in the works and some existing ones that are up on my spread shop, which you can see below. I greatly appreciate it if you checked it out, maybe bought some things, even just giving it a peruse is enough at this point. I have a new design coming out here soon that I do enjoy, and I know you guys will too. And some future plans that will make it worth having to keep an eye on all the stuff that's in there. Also, the channel does have a membership status, so if you want to join for the rewards or just to help out a smaller channel, I would greatly appreciate it. I have so many things that I want to do and build for this channel. The only literal bottleneck is money. So the support you all give me will directly benefit the channel and everyone who works on it. Now back to the zombie summoning ritual. Felidar Retreat. For 3 into white, you get an enchantment that has landfall, so whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you can choose 1. Either create a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. Yep, you know it. This card is one of the scariest things to ever see in a go wide strategy or a landfall strategy, and now we're running a commander that does both here. So we can absolutely demolish our opponents. Each land can get you a 2/2 beast, or a +1/+1 buff with vigilance for end of turn. That makes it so much easier to attack with all of our army this turn. And on top of that, we have other huge payoffs for creatures just entering as well. Welcoming Vampire gets us some card draw, along with Symmetry Matrix and Mentor the Meek. Our Valor and Akros makes all of our creatures stronger until end of turn for every one we see enter the battlefield. On top of all that, we can just sacrifice the whole board of tokens with Bloodspore Thrinax and then have them enter with an absolutely absurd number of counters. And if we accidentally dredge anything that we wanted to get, we can just get it back with the Marius Shepherd. And if it's a plains that triggered her ability, it goes back to the field instead of your hand. Champion of the Stray Souls will get itself out of the grave and let us turn our tokens into grave recursion. And then Braun kind of actually just wants to be in there. Gives everything trample if it is. Primeval Bounty makes it impossible for our opponents to threat assess, since each ramp spell gives us half a d6 worth of counters, and each creature spell nets us another 3/3 creature, and each land skyrockets our life total by 3. Canyon Jeroba is terrifying. It's a little guy, but he's terrifying. All of our creatures get a buff every single time a land enters the battlefield, and if we get 2 or 3 in a turn, everything gets +3/+3. It's kind of crazy. And then when they attack, if we have Champion of Lamholt, it just ends games. Like it always does. It's all it does. Every bit of this deck works together. You get to run the engine and take it to places at the same time. This does require you to assemble the pieces to come together, but with all the recursion in the ramp, you will have the means to do so quite often and quite consistently. That's not even to mention the upgrades. I'm like a kid inside of a hot car, absolutely sweating with excitement about these. Burgeoning, Azusa, Oracle, Moldiah, and Exploration can get more playable lands per turn. It makes it way easier to blast out all of the creatures that we need, on our turn. Anointed Procession. It's a super threatening enchantment, doubling the value of your tokens essentially outright. If you don't have that money, Curse of the Restless Dead is pretty much the same thing to us, but it's essentially 15 times cheaper, so just curse yourself, landfall yourself. They are expensive, but a nice middle ground for the fetches is going to be something like Fabled Passage. It'll get a basic into play untapped if you have 4 more lands, and at some point you're probably going to do that. So, Eerie Ultimatum is one of the most powerful and impactful things you can do in a game. I mean, you essentially recur your grave. And finally, things like Crucible of the Worlds, Conduit of Worlds. All are good ways to get back lands from the grave for free. I recommend if you're going to use one, Conduit of Worlds will be better because of its other ability, but that's just me. Still get that kind of deck recursion out of there. And I mean, this deck makes it super easy to start with the powerful, budget-friendly Necrobloom deck, and then just run and rampage around with your friends. Then, you have plenty of good spots to upgrade and build it up from in order to smartly invest in your decks. You can always get another single later and upgrade these decks at any point. Even if you choose not to, these will always be fun and in the budget. Power budget, TCG.
He said the channel name.
I said the channel name.